If a man could bite the giant hand that catches and destroys him, as I was bitten by a rat while demonstrating my patent trap in my hardware store that day, but a man can never avenge himself on the monstrous ogre, life. You enter the room, that's being born. And then you must live, work out your soul. Aha, the bait that you crave is in view. A woman with money you want to marry, prestige, place, or power in the world. But there's work to do and things to conquer. Oh yes, the wires that screen the bait. At last you get in, but you hear a step. The ogre, life, comes into the room. He was waiting and heard the clang of the spring to watch you nibble the wondrous cheese and stare with his burning eyes at you and scowl and laugh and mock and curse you, running up and down in the trap until your misery bores him.
My life's blossom might have bloomed on all sides, save for a bitter wind which stunted my petals on the side of me in which you in the village could see. From the dust I lift a voice of protest. My flowering side you never saw. Ye living ones, ye are fools indeed, who do not know the ways of the wind and the unseen forces that govern the processes of life.
I would have been as great as George Eliot but for an untoward fate. For look at the photograph of me made by Pennewitt, chin resting on hand, and deep-set eyes, gray, too, and far-searching. But there was the old problem. Should it be celibacy, matrimony, or unchastity? Then John Slack, the rich druggist, wooed me, luring me with the promise of leisure for my novel. And I married him, giving birth to 8 children, and had no time to write. It was all over with me anyway when I ran the needle in my hand, washing the baby's things, and died from lockjaw, an ironical death. Hear me, ambitious souls. Sex is the curse of life.
I've studied many times the marble which was chiseled for me, a boat with a furled sail at rest in a harbor. In truth, it pictures not my destination, but my life. For love was offered me, and I shrank from its disillusionment. Sorrow knocked at my door, but I was afraid. Ambition called to me, and I dreaded the chances. Yet all the while, I hungered for meaning in my life. And now I know that we must lift the sails and catch the winds of destiny wherever they drive the boat. To put meaning in one's life may end in madness, but life without meaning is the torture of restlessness and vague desire. It is a boat longing for the sea and yet afraid.
When Reuben Pantier ran away and threw me, I went to Springfield. There I met a lush whose father just deceased, left him a fortune. He married me when drunk. My life was wretched. A year passed, and one day they found him dead. That made me rich. I moved on to Chicago. After a time, met Tyler Roundtree. Villain. I moved on to New York. A gray-haired magnate went mad about me. So another fortune. He died one night. Right in my arms, you know? I saw his purple face for years thereafter. There was almost a scandal. I moved on. this time to Paris. I was now a woman, subtle, insidious, versed in the world, and rich. My sweet apartment near the Champs-Élysées became a center for all sorts of people. Musicians, poets, dandies, artists, nobles. I wed Count Navigato, native of Genoa. We went to Rome. He poisoned me, I think. Now in the Campo Santo, overlooking the sea where young Columbus dreamed new worlds, see what they chiseled. Contessa Navigato, implora eterna quiete.
Take note, passers-by, of the sharp erosions eaten in my headstone by the wind and rain, almost as if an intangible nemesis or hatred were marking scores against me, but to destroy and not preserve my memory. I in life was the circuit judge, a maker of notches, deciding cases on the points the lawyers scored, not on the right of the matter. Oh, wind and rain, leave my headstone alone, for worse than the curses of the wrong, the cries of the poor, was to lie speechless, yet with vision clear, that even Hodput the murderer, hanged by my sentence, was innocent in soul compared with me.
I, born in Weimar, of a mother who was French, and German father, a most learned professor, orphaned at 14 years, became a dancer known as Russian Sonia, all up and down the boulevards of Paris. Mistress betimes of sundry dukes and counts, and later of poor artists and of poets. At 40 years passé, I sought New York and met old Patrick Hummer on the boat, red-faced and hale, though turned his 60th year, returning after having sold a shipload of cattle in the German city, Hamburg. He brought me to Spoon River, and we lived there 20 years. They thought we were married. Oh, this oak tree near me is the favorite haunt of blue jays, chattering all the day. And why not? For my very dust is laughing, forsaking of the humorous thing called life.
Reverend Wiley advised me not to divorce him for the sake of the children, and Judge Summers advised him the same. So we stuck to the end of the path. But 2 of the children thought he was right, and 2 of the children thought I was right, and the 2 that sided with him blamed me, and the 2 that sided with me blamed him, and grieved for the one that they sided with. And all were torn with the guilt of judging and tortured in soul because they could not admire equally both him and me. Now, every gardener knows that plants grown in cellars and under stones are twisted and yellow and weak. And no mother would let her baby suck diseased milk from her breast. Yet preachers and judges advise the raising of souls where there is no sunlight, but only twilight. No warmth, but only dampness and cold. Preachers and judges.
I was a peasant girl born in Germany, blue-eyed, rosy, happy, and strong. And the first place I worked was at Thomas Green's. On a summer's day, when she was away, he stole into the kitchen and took me right in his arms and kissed me on my throat, I turning my head. Then neither of us seemed to know what happened, and I cried for what would become of me, and cried as my secret began to show. One day, Mrs. Green said she understood and would make no trouble for me, and being childless, would adopt it. He had given her a farm to be still. So she hid in the house and sent out rumors as if it were going to happen to her. And all went well, and the child was born. They were so kind to me. Later, I married Gus Wertmann, and years passed. But at political rallies, when the sitters-by thought I was crying over the eloquence of Hamilton Green, that was not it. No, I wanted to say, that's my son! That's my son!
Yes, here I lie, close to a stunted rose bush, in a forgotten place near the fence, where the thickets from Seaver's woods have crept over, growing sparsely. And you are a leader in New York, the wife of a noted millionaire, beautiful, admired, magnified perhaps by the mirage of distance. You have succeeded. I have failed in the eyes of the world. You are alive. I am dead. Yet, I know that I vanquished your spirit. And I know that lying here, far from you, unheard of among your great friends in the brilliant world where you move, I am really the unconquerable power over your life that robs it of complete triumph.
Dust of my dust, and dust with my dust. O child who died as you entered the world, dead with my death. Not knowing breath, though you tried so hard, with a heart that beat when you lived with me, and stopped when you left me for life. It is well, my child, for you never traveled the long, long way that begins with school days, when little fingers blur under the tears that fall on the crooked letters. And the earliest wound when a little mate leaves you alone for another. And sickness and the face of fear by the bed. The death of a father or mother, or shame for them, or poverty. The maiden sorrow of school days ended. And eyeless nature that makes you drink from the cup of love, though you know it's poisoned. To whom would your flower face have been lifted? Botanist? Weakling? Cry of what blood to yours? Pure or foul, for it makes no matter. It's blood that calls to our blood. And then your children. Oh, what might they be? And what your sorrow? Child, child, death is better than life.
Your red blossoms amid green leaves are drooping, beautiful geranium.
You do not ask for water. You cannot speak. You do not need to speak. Everyone knows you are dying of thirst, yet they do not bring water. They pass on saying, the geranium wants water. And I, who had happiness to share and longed to share your happiness, I who loved you, Spoon River, and craved your love, withered before your eyes, Spoon River, thirsting, voiceless from chasteness of soul to ask you for love. You who knew and saw me perish before you, like this geranium, which someone has planted over me and left to die.
I wrote him a letter asking him for old time's sake to discharge my sick boy from the army. But maybe he couldn't read it. So I went to town and had James Garber, who wrote beautifully, write him a letter. But maybe that got lost in the mail. So I went all the way to Washington. I was more than an hour finding the White House, and when I found it, they turned me away, hiding their smiles. Then I thought, oh well, he ain't the same as when I boarded him. And he and my husband worked together, and all of us called him Abe there in Menard. As a last attempt, I turned to a guard and said, please say it's old Aunt Hannah Armstrong from Illinois come to see him about her sick boy in the army. Well, just in a moment, they let me in. And when he saw me, he broke into a laugh and dropped his business as president and wrote in his own hand Doug's discharge, talking the while of the early days and telling stories.
I went to the dances at Chandlerville and played Snap Out at Winchester. One time, we changed partners, riding home in the moonlight of middle June. And then I found Davis. We were married and lived together for 70 years, enjoying, working, raising the 12 children, 8 of whom we lost ere I had reached the age of 60. I spun, I wove, I kept the house, I nursed the sick, I made the garden, and for holiday, I rambled over the fields where sang the larks, and by Spoon River where I gathered many a shell, and many a flower, the medicinal weed, shouting to the wooded hills, singing to the green valleys. At 96, I had lived long enough. That is all, and passed to sweet repose. What's this I hear of sorrow and weariness, anger, discontent, and drooping hopes? Degenerate sons and daughters, life is too strong for you. It takes life to love life.